consumer decision-making process. Traditionally, consumers approach decision-making process from a rational perspective. But the changed times have changed the entire equation of consumer decision-making process. Thus, to succeed in current times, it is extremely important from a marketer's point of view to understand how situations and internal and external sources of influence affect the purchase decision-making process. Due to these reasons, in this lesson, we will study various issues and models of consumer decision-making process. It follows from the previous slide that after studying this lesson, you should be able to analyze the consumer decision-making process, analyze the consumer decision models, understand the routinized response behavior, analyze limited and extensive problem-solving behavior. The figure here shows the stepwise process of consumer decision-making. It begins when a buyer becomes aware of an unsatisfied need or a problem. Problem recognition is a critical stage in consumer decision-making process because without it, there is no deliberate search for information. The process of problem recognition combines some highly relevant consumer behavior. The process of problem recognition combines some highly relevant consumer behavior concepts, such as information processing and the motivation process. After problem or need recognition, consumers generally take steps to gather adequate information to select the appropriate solution. Information search refers to what consumer surveys in his or her environment for suitable information to make a satisfying purchase decision. Consumers' evaluative criteria refers to various dimensions, features, characteristics and benefits that a consumer desires to solve a certain problem. Making a purchase is often a simple routine matter of going to a retail outlet where the consumer looks around and quickly picks out something needed. Consumers' favorable post-purchase evaluation leads to satisfaction. Consumers choose a particular brand or retail outlet because they perceive it as a better overall choice than the other alternative that were evaluated while making the purchase decision. As one may expect, a positive post-purchase evaluation results in satisfaction, and the negative evaluation causes dissatisfaction. The consumer generally experiences satisfaction when the performance level exceeds the minimum performance expectations. A delighted consumer is also inclined to spread favorable word of mouth. Conflict model was presented by Francisco Nicosia in the early 1960s to shift focus from the act of purchase itself to the more complex decision-making process that consumers engage in about products and services. The model contains 4 major fields or components. Field 1 includes the firm's attributes and outputs, or communications and the consumer's psychological attributes. Field 2, in which consumer searches for an evaluation and of the firm's outputs and other available alternatives. Field 3 includes consumer's motivated act of purchase. And Field 4 comprises the consumer's storage or use of products. Nicosia assumes that the consumer is seeking to fulfill specific goals and that initially there is no history between the consumers and the firms, so no positive or negative predisposition towards the firm exists in the consumer's mind. The Nicosia model explains the consumer's buying behavior from the marketer's perspective. However, it fails to explain in detail the firm's and consumers' attributes and doesn't take into account that consumers might already be having predisposition with respect to a particular product or a brand. The Howard Chase model represents a major revision of an earlier systematic effort to develop a comprehensive theory of buyer decision-making. This model depicts and creates a distinction among 3 stages of decision-making, namely extensive problem-solving, limited problem-solving, and routinized response behavior. The Eagle-Blackwell-Miniard model assumes that consumer approach is that of problem-solving. It, however, lacks clarity regarding the influence of individual and environmental variables on consumer decision-making. At one end of choice continuum is nominal decision-making, also referred to as nominal problem-solving, habitual decision-making, or routine problem-solving. Nominal decision-making is generally the outcome of continued satisfaction with a brand which was initially chosen after an extended decision-making process, or the consumer does not attach much importance to the product category or purchase. The consumer buys Aquafresh toothpaste without further consideration because it meets her or his overall needs, even though using the best available toothpaste is important to her or him. Limited decision making is usually more straightforward and simple. It involves internal and limited external search, consideration of just few alternatives, simple decision rules on a few attributes, and little post-purchase evaluation. Consumer purchases involve extended decision-making correspond most closely to the traditional decision-making perspective. Such decisions involve extensive internal and external information search followed by a rigorous evaluation of several alternatives. Because consumers do not possess any meaningful information about the product or service and need much of it. Now let us check if we have understood the various concepts discussed in this lesson clearly. Limited decision making occurs when products are low cost and frequently purchased. Wrong. Consumer purchases involving extended decision making correspond most closely to the traditional decision making perspective. Right. The Howard-Schacht model is also known as the conflict model. Wrong. Before we end, let us briefly revise what we've studied till so far. Buying decisions and consumption of product or services always takes place in the context of some specific situation. It is extremely important for marketers to understand how situations and internal as well as external influences affect the purchase decision process. Depending on various factors including the level of consumers' involvement, time pressure, and the mood, etc., consumer decision-making generally falls under one of the three major decision-making approaches: nominal decision-making, limited decision-making, and extended decision-making. Nominal decision-making occurs when the products are low cost, frequently purchased, familiar brand or product, of low involvement category, and little thought or search time is given to purchase. Limited decision-making is usually straightforward and simple. It involves input from long-term memory and limited search. Few alternatives and attributes are considered, and there is little or no post-purchase evaluation. Extended decision-making occurs when the product is expensive, risky, ego-intensive, is purchased infrequently, consumer involvement is high, consumer considers much information from internal and external sources, post-purchase evaluation is more likely to be complex and dissonance-causing. Nominal decision-making and extended decision-making are two ends of the continuum. In between, there might be various shades of consumer involvement depending on the product category, nature of purchase situation, and personal factors.